Good morning. Last time, we embarked on Nietzsche's critique of traditional philosophy, a journey into questioning the very nature of truth and, indeed, the philosopher's claim to objective attainment. Remember? We hinted that perhaps, just perhaps, so-called principles were merely prejudices in disguise, and that powerful underlying forces, these wills, might be the true architects of philosophical systems. Today, we dive deeper, much deeper, into Aphorism 6 of Beyond Good and Evil. And here, Nietzsche does not just sharpen his critique. He wields it like a surgeon's scalpel. He is no longer simply asking if philosophers grasp truth. Oh no, now the question becomes far more radical. Why do they assert what they do? Truth, value, that is almost secondary here. This aphorism, my friends, is pivotal, not just for Nietzsche, but for the entire trajectory of 20th and 21st century thought. It is a game changer, reshaping how we even approach philosophy itself. And we will see him unleash his signature methods, genealogy, psychological critique, all to unmask what he considers the true origins, the hidden engines of philosophical systems. So, how does Nietzsche begin this radical unmasking? With a statement so bold, it sets the entire stage. He writes,
I have gradually come to realize what every great philosophy so far has been, a confession of faith on the part of its author, and a type of involuntary and unself-conscious memoir.
And he does not stop there. He drives the point home, specifying the very core of this revelation.
In short, that the moral or immoral intentions in every philosophy constitute the true living seed from which the whole plant has always grown.
Now, let us really unpack this. A confession of faith, an involuntary and unself-conscious memoir. Think about those words. The German term here, Geständnis, is so rich. It is not merely a personal admission, you see. It also carries the weight of a Glaubensbekenntnis, a true confession of faith. And this points directly to those deeply embedded, often unexamined, foundational beliefs Nietzsche pinpoints at the very root of philosophy. What does this immediately suggest about the nature of philosophical claims? If philosophy is a memoir, then it is profoundly personal, intensely so. And if it is involuntary and unself-conscious, well, that implies the philosopher might be a stranger to their own deepest revelations. They might not even grasp what they are truly laying bare. A direct challenge, is it not, to that age-old image of the philosopher, the master of self-awareness, the paragon of pure reason. Then there are these moral or immoral intentions. And again, the German moral is key. It is not just about prescriptive ethics. No, it encompasses the character, the foundational evaluative stance of an individual. And this, Nietzsche says, is the true living seed. A genealogical claim, pure and simple. Nietzsche is digging for the origin, is he not? For that tiny germ from which the whole sprawling plant of a philosophical system unfurls. It is not merely about ideas floating in an intellectual ether. No, it is about the valuative core, those deep-seated moral commitments that precede and inevitably shape the grand intellectual edifice. And notice this, the aphoristic form itself, so concise, so assertive, does it not act as a seed for our thoughts, mirroring the very claim it makes? Clever. This seed and plant metaphor, it is not just a pretty picture, it is fundamental to his argument. It implies an organic, often hidden, development from a potent core. And thinkers who came later, post-structuralists like Foucault or Derrida, they absolutely seized on this, viewing philosophy itself as a text driven by underlying, often unacknowledged forces. Forces where form and content are impossibly tangled. Now, let us be clear. This claim that every great philosophy is a confession, that is a bold, sweeping generalization. No doubt about it. From, say, an analytic standpoint, you might immediately fire back. How on earth do you verify that for every philosophy? Is it even empirically falsifiable? And is not there a risk here, the genetic fallacy, judging a philosophy's validity solely by its origins?
Furthermore, this universal assertion throws up a fascinating scholarly puzzle. How does it square with Nietzsche's own, well-known perspectivism? I mean, if all truth is truly perspectival, then is not this very claim just Nietzsche's perspective?
Or does he intend for it to have some special unmasking power, standing outside or above other perspectives? And this, right here, is where interpretations begin to fork. Some scholars lean into the unmasking critique. They see Nietzsche as systematically debunking all of philosophy's grand pretensions to objectivity. But then, others suggest a philosopher's self-portrait angle. They ask, what does this mean for Nietzsche's own work? Is he, too, painting an involuntary memoir with his words? This self-referential twist, this turning of the critique back upon itself, complicates any easy, straightforward reading, does it not? It suggests his text performatively enacts the very claims it is making. The medium is the message, in a sense. So, this idea of philosophy as an involuntary and unself-conscious memoir, it really beckons us to read philosophical texts in a whole new way, a way that actively seeks to unmask their latent content. It is like imagining a philosophy as a kind of secret diary, one the author did not even fully realize they were keeping, revealing surprising glimpses into their personality, their most cherished beliefs, even their psychological fabric, sometimes completely unintentionally. Here is something to chew on later, an exercise. Pick an argument, any argument, from a philosopher you know well. Go beyond their explicit words. Ask yourself, what might this argument unintentionally betray about their fears, their hopes, their bedrock assumptions about life, about human nature?
What kind of person does this philosophy seem to cry out from? All right, so if philosophies are these complex plants grown from personal seeds, how do we go about understanding them? Nietzsche offers a direct, methodological command.
Actually, to explain how the strangest metaphysical claims of a philosopher really come about, it is always good and wise to begin by asking, what morality is he getting at?
This instruction, it is crucial, absolutely pivotal. And, did you catch that parenthetical aside, ist er? Is he getting at? The form itself drags the philosopher's personal being right into the heart of the question. It enacts the very focus on the personal that the content demands. So, instead of diving in with, is this metaphysical claim true, valid, sound? Nietzsche slams on the brakes. He urges us, no. He compels us to first ask, what is the underlying moral project here? This is pure genealogy in action. Think of genealogy, in this light, as being a detective for ideas. Not just asking, is this idea true? No. A genealogist digs deeper. Where did this idea crawl out from? What purpose did it originally serve? Whose agenda, whose values might it secretly reflect? This radically prioritizes the genesis, the birth story, of ideas over their mere logical justification. And that is a massive challenge to how philosophy has traditionally been done. A challenge that echoes loudly in critical thought, even today. So, yes, when we face some towering, complex philosophical system, Nietzsche's advice is clear. Hunt for the moral vision that gives it life, that animates it from within. Next, he takes aim, directly confronting a long-cherished view of what motivates philosophers.
Consequently, I do not believe that a drive for knowledge is the father of philosophy, but rather that another drive, here as elsewhere, used knowledge and misknowledge merely as a tool.
A radical demotion, the drive for knowledge, knocked off its pedestal. And that German word, Triebe. Drive in English does not quite capture its full force. Triebe suggests something primal, an active, psychophysiological urge.
A fundamental quantum of energy, desperate for expression. Far more malleable, more interpretable than some fixed, rigid instinct. Remember our talks about the will to truth, while Nietzsche now says even that is secondary, a mere instrument. So, if philosophers, as we have pondered, often mistake their gut feelings, their prejudices, for grand principles, Nietzsche now unearths a deeper layer. These prejudices, he argues, spring from their very moral core, which is itself nothing but an expression of some other tribe. And this idea, that knowledge, and get this, even misknowledge, can be a tool, that is huge. It points to a pragmatic, maybe even a cynical, manipulative relationship with truth, all orchestrated by these underlying drives. This is a full frontal assault on that sacred ideal of philosophy, the pure, disinterested pursuit of objective truth through calm reason. And in this, Nietzsche joins ranks with that powerful 19th century hermeneutics of suspicion. Think Marx, think Freud, all of them dedicated to unearthing the hidden foundations, often material or psychological, beneath seemingly autonomous ideas. And let us not forget to turn this lens back on Nietzsche himself. If we do, his own fiery pronouncements here become tools for his drives. Perhaps a drive to conquer past philosophies, or to carve out new values. This does not necessarily invalidate his points, mind you. But it sure does complicate any claim they might have to disinterested truth by his own ruthless standards. This whole demotion of the drive for knowledge, it is a classic Nietzschean move, critique by recontextualization. He is shaking the foundations of that common, almost comforting idea, that philosophers are simply pure, noble truth seekers. He is forcing us to ask, could it be that the search for truth is actually a cleverly disguised strategy, a tactic deployed by other, far more fundamental desires? Think about it personally for a moment. A time you actively sought knowledge. Was it really, truly, for its own pure sake? Or was there another whisper in the background? A desire to win an argument, perhaps, to solve a nagging problem, to achieve some practical end? How does reframing knowledge as a tool shift how we perceive its pursuit, especially within philosophy? So, if not the drive for knowledge, then what? What is this mysterious other drive? Or, more accurately, these are the Triebe. Nietzsche does not leave us hanging. He elaborates.
But anyone who looks at people's basic drives to see how far they may have played their little game right here as inspiring geniuses, or daemons or sprites, will find that they all practiced philosophy at some point, and that every single one of them would be only too pleased to present itself as the ultimate purpose of existence and as rightful master of all the other drives.
And then, the crucial punchline.
Because every drive craves mastery, and this leads it to try philosophizing.
And there it is. The singular other drive now explodes into a teeming multiplicity of basic drives, Triebe. This concept, make no mistake, is absolutely central to Nietzsche. And, though he transforms it, you can see the intellectual DNA here, tracing back to Schopenhauer's singular, all-encompassing metaphysical will, that supposed inner essence of the world. But Nietzsche, he shatters that singular will. He pluralizes it, transforming it into a host of competing drives, all jostling for position within the individual. And each Triebe, listen to how he personifies them, as inspiring geniuses, or even daemons or sprites. So wonderfully evocative. And these are not just pretty words, they are constitutive of his vision. These drives do not merely want expression. Oh no. Each one craves mastery. It yearns to be the rightful master over all the others, to crown itself the ultimate purpose of existence, And its weapon of choice in this ambition? It tries philosophizing. Yes, philosophy itself becomes the grand arena, the battlefield, where these drives clash for dominance, each one desperately trying to legislate its own particular values as universal truths. A profound psychological speculation, is it not? One that, in many ways, strikingly anticipates key themes in Freudian psychoanalysis, that later emphasis on unconscious drives, shaping every nook and cranny of our conscious thoughts and behaviors. Thinkers like Deleuze, they would later grab hold of this very notion of drives as fundamental, constituent forces. And a Foucauldian reading? It would, of course, zoom in on the raw power dynamics throbbing within these drives as they crave mastery and engage in philosophizing. But it is also worth a moment's pause here. These drives, even as they launch a fierce critique against traditional metaphysics, could they themselves, ironically, begin to function as a new kind of quasi-metaphysical, explanatory principle? Something to consider. So, where are we? We have seen several key concepts crystallize and evolve, have not we? Drives, these tribes, have morphed from a vague another drive into a vibrant plurality of basic drives, each one armed with its own agenda. Moral intentions? They are now clearly the outward expression of these drives' relentless attempts to assert their specific values. And the once vaunted drive for knowledge? Decisively, even brutally, subordinated. Philosophy as confession? We now see it as the dramatic expression of the ceaseless internal war for mastery among the drives. This is a perfect spot to catch our breath, to synthesize. Because what Nietzsche has done here is monumental. He has effectively flipped the traditional hierarchy completely on its head. It is no longer pure desire for knowledge, philosophical systems, maybe some moral implications. No, that is out. Instead, it is fundamental, non-rational Triebe, each one burning with the craving for mastery, each one embodying a distinct moral vision. These are what use the activity of philosophizing, use the pursuit of knowledge, and yes, even misknowledge, as their willing or unwilling instruments. And it is precisely here that the methodological demonstration reading of this aphorism really comes alive. Because Nietzsche is not just lobbing provocative claims at us. He is actively showing us. He is demonstrating how to dissect and analyze philosophy. That instruction to hunt for the morality, followed by his dramatic exposition of Drives philosophizing. That is a hands-on, practical demonstration of his genealogical and psychological toolkit. Could it be that the literal truth of his historical claims about specific past philosophers is actually less important to him in this moment? Perhaps. Perhaps what matters more is showcasing the sheer, unadulterated power of this new interpretive lens. A lens, by the way, that has profoundly shaped critical theory ever since, and continues to fire up genealogical approaches across countless disciplines, even today. Now, to really make his portrait of the philosopher pop, Nietzsche throws in a contrast, a foil, if you will.
Of course, with scholars, the truly scientific people, things might be different, better, if you will. With them, there might really be something like a drive for knowledge. Some independent little clockwork mechanism that, once well-wound, ticks bravely away without essentially involving the rest of the scholar's drives.
And he goes on. And
for this reason, the scholar's real interests usually lie somewhere else entirely, with the family, or earning money, or in politics. In fact, it is almost a matter of indifference whether his little engine is put to work in this or that field of research, and whether the promising young worker turns himself into a good philologist or fungus expert or chemist does not signify anything about him that he becomes one thing or the other.
this picture of the scholar, the wissenschaftliche Mensch. And it is crucial to remember, Wissenschaft is not just science in the narrow lab coat sense. It is any rigorous, systematic discipline. Think of Nietzsche's own stomping ground, classical philology. That too is Wissenschaft. This depiction, it is intriguing, to say the least. But is he entirely serious? Or, as he slyly hints with that little better if you will, is there a mischievous glint of philosophical irony in his eye here? The scholar, we are told, might just possess a genuine, independent little clockwork mechanism for gobbling up knowledge, supposedly detached from their other drives, their messy personal interests, which, by the way, are usually found in rather mundane places, family, money, politics. Their specific field of study, almost arbitrary. It does not signify anything about him. Imagine. It is a classic argument by contrast, is it not? He is setting up an ideal type, or, let us be honest, perhaps a bit of a caricature, of the scholar. Why? To throw into stark relief everything the philosopher is not. And naturally, this philosopher-scholar divide has sparked no end of scholarly debate. Is this picture of the scholar fair? Is it an oversimplification? Does it truly capture the fire, the passion that so many scholars clearly feel for their chosen patch of ground? A Derridian, for instance, might want to get in there and deconstruct this whole philosopher-scholar binary, question its neatness, its stability, poke at the idealized other it so carefully constructs. And the whole point of this contrast? It slams home in the aphorism's powerful conclusion.
In contrast, there is absolutely nothing impersonal about the philosopher.
A definitive, categorical assertion. Unlike that scholar, whose work might hover detached from their core being, the philosopher, they are utterly and completely implicated in their philosophy, entangled. And the most crucial, the most decisive sign of this profound personal investment, what is it?
And in particular, his morals bear decided and decisive witness to who he is, which means, in what order of rank the innermost drives of his nature stand with respect to each other.
And boom, Nietzsche brings it all crashing together. The philosopher's morality, it is not some afterthought, not an optional extra tacked onto their metaphysics. No, it is the key, a decided and decisive witness to who they fundamentally are. This move effectively demolishes those old, comfortable boundaries. Metaphysics here, ethics over there, epistemology in this box, psychology in that one. All collapsed. And this identity, this who he is to be understood entirely in terms of the order of rank of their innermost drives. So, a hierarchy enters the picture. The Triebe are not just a chaotic mob, no longer just a swirling, chaotic multiplicity. Now, there is organization, a dominant structure, a pecking order, if you like. And the philosophy that emerges? It is a living testament, a monument to precisely which drives have clawed their way to the top, achieved ascendancy within that specific individual. This order of rank among drives, it is a crucial stepping stone, a clear precursor to Nietzsche's more fully fleshed out concept of the will to power, a concept that is all about the organization and amplification of power, often through exactly this kind of hierarchical structuring. That claim, absolutely nothing impersonal about the philosopher, it is incredibly forceful. And if we take him at his word, then this very assertion, being a pillar of his philosophy, must itself be profoundly personal. It must reveal who he is, and who might that be? Perhaps someone for whom the drive to unmask, to tear away veils, is absolutely paramount. Now, while this radical focus on the philosopher's personal, deep constitution is utterly central for Nietzsche, we have to acknowledge a real interpretive challenge here, a big one. How can anyone definitively access, let alone prove, the innermost drives of any thinker? especially one long dead from a distant past. That is not to diminish the raw, provocative power of his heuristic, not at all. But it is to stare squarely at the immense complexities tangled up in such deep psychological dives. A task, by the way, that keeps philosophical scholarship buzzing. You have got scholars like Alexander Nehamas exploring this very notion, philosophy as a conscious act of self-creation. And then others, like Brian Leiter, are bringing these drives into conversation with modern cognitive science, offering fascinating naturalistic readings. So, the conversation continues. So, let us pull it all together. Nietzsche's core argument in this powerhouse of an aphorism? He kicks off by declaring that every great philosophy is, at its heart, a personal confession, an involuntary memoir, and its taproot, the author's deep-seated moral intentions, that Geständnis, that moral. Then, with a swift stroke, he demotes the venerable drive for knowledge, recasting it as nothing more than a tool, a handy instrument for other, more fundamental drives. These, Triebe. And each of these, remember, craves mastery. Each one tries philosophizing as its path to power. He throws this vision of the passionate, driven philosopher into sharp relief by contrasting it with the scholar, the wissenschaftlicher Mensch, who, he suggests, might operate with a more detached, almost mechanical, drive for knowledge. And he brings it home with a powerful claim. The philosopher is never impersonal. Their work is always, inextricably, about them. And their morality? That is the Rosetta Stone. It reveals the secret hierarchy, the order of rank of their innermost drives. What about the nuts and bolts of his reasoning here? Well, we have seen him use a few key tools. There is inductive generalization, that sweeping claim about every great philosophy so far. There is abductive reasoning, essentially arguing that these underlying drives offer the best explanation for why philosophers make the bizarre metaphysical claims they do. And, of course, that sharp argument by contrast, philosopher versus scholar. His whole argument really stands on a few core premises, does it not? That philosophies are, fundamentally, personal confessions. That the old drive for knowledge just does not cut it as an explanation. That human beings are animated by these drives, all clamoring for mastery. And crucially, that a philosopher's morality is a direct window into their personal constitution. What is the real power of this framework? Its strength, I think, lies in its sheer audacity, its novel, frontal assault on those comfortable assumptions about philosophical objectivity, and its radical regrounding of philosophy, yanking it down from the ethereal clouds and planting it firmly in the soil of the personal, the affective, even the physiological. But are there weak spots, potential vulnerabilities? Absolutely. There is that thorny problem of empirically verifying these bold claims about innermost drives. And, as we have touched on, that lingering, fascinating tension. How do these seemingly universal claims sit with Nietzsche's own deep commitment to perspectivism? And, as we have journeyed through it, it is clear that this single aphorism has ignited a bonfire of interpretations within scholarship. It has a rich history. Some see it mainly as that relentless unmasking critique. Others focus on it as a methodological demonstration, Nietzsche rolling up his sleeves and showing us his new toolkit. And still others read it as a profoundly self-referential confession, Nietzsche applying his own medicine. Perhaps the most comprehensive view? It probably sees these as intertwined. The unmasking is achieved precisely through his demonstration of this new method, and that demonstration, in turn, might just be the deepest form of Nietzschean confession. This one aphorism. It has been a lodestone for so many different schools of thought. Existentialists loved it for its emphasis on personal commitment. The post-structuralist wave, Foucault, Deleuze, Derrida,
They seized on Nietzsche as the ultimate methodological radical. And more recently, Anglo-American scholars have been diving deep into his moral psychology, often with this aphorism as a key touchstone. Think about it. Concepts like drives, moral intentions, confession, even the drive for knowledge, they have not stayed static, have they? They have twisted, turned, and evolved dramatically, even just within the confines of this single, dense aphorism, painting an incredibly dynamic, almost turbulent, picture of the philosopher's inner landscape and how it erupts into their intellectual work.
And those core methods, genealogy, psychological critique, Nietzsche is not just telling us about them. He is doing them. He is performing them right before our eyes. And in doing so, he is transforming our very understanding of what philosophy is, or what it could be. Maybe it is less about discovering some timeless, pre-existing truth with a capital T, and more about, what? Value, articulation? A kind of symptomatology, reading the signs? Or even, most radically, a mode of self-creation. This shift, this Nietzschean earthquake, has sent tremors through philosophy ever since. It continues to challenge that comfortable old idea of purely objective philosophical inquiry. And it fuels the ongoing, often fiery debates about the very nature of interpretation and critique across all the humanities. Its impact? Lasting, profound. Okay, before we wrap this particular exploration, let us grapple with a few questions. Let us really wrestle with the complex, challenging ideas Nietzsche has thrown down. Food for thought and for discussion. First up, let us circle back to that core directive. Nietzsche tells us,
To explain how the strangest metaphysical claims of a philosopher really come about, it is always good and wise to begin by asking, what morality is he getting at?
all right, let us put this to the test. Take someone we all know, say Immanuel Kant. If we peer at Kant through this Nietzschean lens, what morality do you think he might be getting at with his categorical imperative, or with those famously abstruse arguments for the noumenal realm?
What underlying values, what powerful drives might Nietzsche claim are clamoring for expression in Kant's critical philosophy? Ponder that, really chew on it for a few minutes. Okay, let us really let that sink in. Second big question, that tricky self-referential loop.
If, as Nietzsche thunders, every great philosophy so far has been a confession of faith on the part of its author, and a type of involuntary and unself-conscious memoir, well, what about this very statement? What confession is Nietzsche himself making in Aphorism 6?
What moral intention might be its living seed, driving his unmasking? And, crucially, how does this reflexive twist impact the epistemological standing of his entire critique? Does it strengthen it? Weaken it? Complicate it beyond belief? Thirdly, that philosopher versus scholar distinction, that independent little clockwork mechanism he attributes, perhaps ironically, to the scholar. Is that a viable ideal we should strive for? Is it a deliberate, even mischievous caricature? Or is it something else entirely? And more importantly, does this distinction actually hold water when we really scrutinize it? Especially when we think about the undeniable passion, the deep personal investment that so many scholars, in the broad sense of Wissenschaft, pour into their work day in and day out. And one last big one for now. If philosophy truly is, as Nietzsche so provocatively suggests, the outcome of these primal drives craving mastery, each one trying philosophizing to get its way, what on earth does that imply for our cherished notions of philosophical progress? Or for the very possibility of finding genuine, intersubjective agreement in philosophy? Can we still talk about getting closer to the truth, if it is all a battle of wills? This single aphorism, then, by violently regrounding philosophy, dragging it into the messy, vibrant reality of the personal, the moral, the drive-based constitution of the individual philosopher, it absolutely sets the stage for everything that follows in Nietzsche's critiques. And more than that, It issues a stark demand. A demand for radical self-awareness from anyone at all, who dares to engage in the philosophical endeavor, yourself included. He has laid down his cards. He has shown us how he believes philosophers truly operate. So, what is next? We can absolutely anticipate, cannot we? But in the aphorisms to come, he is going to take this freshly sharpened lens and begin to apply it, ruthlessly, to specific philosophical traditions, to cherished moral systems. Expect fireworks. So, for next time, as we venture into Aphorism 7 and the territories beyond, I want this question to echo in your minds. If you find Nietzsche's account here, philosophy is confession, philosophy is the outcry of ranked drives, if you find it even remotely persuasive, what are the profound implications for your own engagement with philosophical texts? How must it change the way you read, the way you interpret, the way you critique not just others, but philosophy itself, including, fascinatingly, the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche? Think about that.